Hey Brandon, how's everything going today?
Hey, Tal, good to be on with you today.
It is my pleasure. I'm very excited to dive into your story and hear kind of what you're working on these days. And I like to get started with the early days of Brandon. So take us back to your childhood, to early life. Tell us what life was like as a child growing up.
Hmm. Well, one of the things that stands out for me, and I think the reason it stands out is because I think it shaped a lot of what I do today, is my dad and the impact he had on me to be learning things. When I was 1.5 years old, he started teaching me the multiplication tables. And not that I knew what it meant, and I probably only learned a few of them, but people would be like, "Hey, Brandon, what's 2 times 2?" And when I was 4, he taught me all the presidents forwards and backwards,
Wow.
so I could list them in order. And I was kind of like a fun party trick in that way. Not necessarily the best thing to be, um, but that really shaped a lot of my childhood. When I was in 5th grade, he gave me Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I remember being in class. I was sitting in the class, and we had those desks that were all. I don't know if you had this too. They were all stuck together. It was like 4 people. Your desks were facing each other, so it was one kind of big table. You're sitting with 4 people, and I'm sitting there, my head kind of like in my lap, because I'm reading Think and Grow Rich. And finally, the teacher who's at the whiteboard, she looks over and sees, and she slowly walks over to me, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was so proud. I'm like, "I'm reading Think and Grow Rich." And all she said, she didn't, you know, get me in trouble or anything. She just looks at me and she says, "Why?" And but I think it was just experiences like these in my childhood that shaped a lot of who I am and what I'm doing today.
That's super cool, man. So, is your father an entrepreneur, or what does he kind of do, or what did he do to kind of provide you with this mindset at such a young age? Because that is remarkable. Everyone should be reading Think and Grow Rich in the 5th grade underneath the table. I think that's great stuff. So talk about your dad a little bit.
Yeah, he's not. I mean, he was just reading these books for himself. He was interested in Dale Carnegie and positive thinking, and whenever we'd be in the car, he'd be quoting, whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve, and things like that. So he was always just trying to pass that on. So that was kind of his influence. He wasn't necessarily reading these books every day, but it was just something that really resonated with him around that time. And instead of kind of just holding it to himself, he was really excited to share it with my sister and I.
That's really great. In my opinion, I think that we need to be taught these things at a young age, like you, and you can tell. Like, look at all the books behind you. Like, we're in your office or wherever. It's incredible because the books are just filled with so much knowledge and wisdom from years and years and years. And as you know, I'm sure the younger you are, the better you can absorb that information.
Mm.
So I think it's just very important to do what your father did for you. And clearly, so it had a large impact on what you're doing today. Am I right?
Absolutely.
So talk to us about, I guess you could say, your first couple jobs in the workplace. So your 5th grade reading Think and Grow Rich. What were your high school years like leading up to, how old are you now currently?
I'm 28.
28, that's what I thought. Okay, I'm 27 also, right around the same age. So when you were in high school and leading up to your first few jobs in the workforce, what were those years like? And then take us into your first couple jobs, how that went, and how you kind of evolved from there.
Yeah. So what was interesting for me about high school is I started in a new school. And the school started in 7th grade, so everybody already knew each other, and I was new to the school along with 3 or 4 other people. And I just left all my friends who were continuing to the same high school from the elementary school I was at before. So it started as a really tough period for me where I didn't know what I wanted to do, but also I was really shy, really nervous, didn't have any friends. I was, not around anybody, just a really big transition point for me. And I think the first 2 years of high school, I wasn't really pursuing anything or putting myself out there in any way or any of that stuff. And I mean, I did do some internships with family in high school, which was cool, doing it with my uncle and things like that. And then college was kind of similar. I worked with also different family who did real estate in New York and things like that in college. And I also started working at a restaurant that I'd later start to manage right after school as well.
So do you think any of those jobs kind of made a lasting impact on you as far as what you're currently doing, or were they just kind of one-off jobs?
I think they did it and didn't. In one sense, they showed me what I don't want to do. And I mean, they were all great jobs. I got, in every single one of them, there were things like, wow, I really love this and I would like to do this. And I was so grateful for everyone. But of course, in everything that you do, you see little things and you think, you know what? I don't know if that part of it I would want to do when I'm doing whatever I want to do in the future. So I think they did have that impact for sure. And I think the other one, the other big impact was running the restaurant. I'm right out of school. I'm running a restaurant and learning so many things along the way, really learning on the job. And I know that I wasn't the same person at the end of it that I was at the beginning.
So two things I want to hit on there is what you just said, taking these certain skills and things from different jobs. I want to especially hit on that restaurant job, but also I want to talk about the importance of finding out what you don't want to do, what you don't enjoy, what isn't your passion. Can you kind of elaborate on those a little bit?
Yeah, well, a lot of times the best way to define what you want, I have a course on productivity, and one of the things that I say in there, and I can't even remember who said this quote, but it said something like, we have no idea what we want, and then we kill ourselves our entire lives trying to get it. And most people, even when they do think they know what they want, they define it like, I want to be healthy, or I want to be rich, not realizing that those labels don't really mean anything in the real world. Healthy compared to what? Rich compared to what? So I think the point is that a lot of times the way to get that specific answer for what it is specifically that you want to move toward is by knowing what you want to move away from. And that's for two reasons. One, a lot of people are more motivated by what they want to move away from than what they want to move towards. So it's helpful to do both. But also it's like Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner. He always says a lot of times the best way to get an answer to something is to invert the problem. So if you want to say, okay, what does it take to be successful? It's often a lot more useful to ask, okay, what leads to failure? Answer that question, and then you can invert it. Like, okay, I need to do the opposite of those things. So that's for those reasons, I think it is helpful to know what you don't want as well as what you do want.
So let's just take a scenario here. Somebody has an idea, okay, I want to be wealthy. Let's just use that because I'm sure a lot of people listening want to be wealthy, which is totally understandable. And they're kind of going through the workforce. They're stuck in a job, let's say a job for 10 years, 5 years, however many years that they really don't enjoy. But if they would leave that job, they would be scared or worried because they're living paycheck to paycheck, but they have this big vision of where they should be or what they should be doing and these big, large goals that are very broad. So what advice would you give to that person that's stuck in the one job and has big goals, but also has these very large aspirations?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is that it starts with how you think and feel about what that goal is. So first off, if you're not specific about what the goal is, then quitting your job and figuring it out probably won't do you very much good. And you don't have to be specific to the point of, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, but you need to know, okay, these are the criteria that I want to hit. But beyond that, I think it's really important to believe that you can do it and be excited about it. A lot of people, they're like, oh, I really, really want these things, but they're so resigned about the world that in my belief, no matter what action they take, it's very unlikely they're going to do it, that they're going to follow through and get the results that they want. So I think the first thing is not only being clear on what you want, but are you excited about it, and do you have that feeling like it's right around the corner? Because I realize that the best way to feel motivated about something is to have that feeling that whatever it is you want is literally right there for you to take. It's right around the corner. And I would say first develop those feelings before making any radical change. But I think the other thing too is, and I guess you could look at this at both sides. When you think of it from an investing perspective, whether you talk to somebody who's successful in stocks or real estate, whatever it is, they always say the most important thing is protect the downside. But then you look at a lot of other people, whether it's Elon Musk or, other people that people look up to today, and they took huge risks. And I think that's what it comes down to also, is there isn't always a clear solution of, okay, you need to do this or you need to do that. But maybe just keeping both perspectives in mind. But I really do believe, if it's your livelihood, whenever possible, do protect the downside.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the downside isn't as big as people think of, okay, I'm going to quit my job, when in reality, if you have the skill set, you could probably find something else.
Right, exactly. And it's a couple things there. When you do quit that job, for a lot of people, like for me, for example, it lights a fire under my ass, So I get in go mode, and it really puts that pressure, and I perform well under pressure. So I know everybody's a little different with that. And I also like what you said about having that feeling like it's right around the corner. It's like feeling and knowing that that big move, that next big thing that you've been waiting for, is one pivot away from where you currently are. So is there something that you've done in your life, or that you've read about in all these incredible books that you've read, that is like a helpful tip to bring, like, to feel that feeling, to kind of train your mind to say, okay, I know that this is right away. I just need to, I guess, keep doing what I'm doing or stay open. Is there anything you've learned in your experiences thus far that kind of hits on that?
Yeah, of course, there are a lot of things. I think something that is really helpful is, I'll give you a couple examples. There was a documentary on, I can't remember if it was Showtime or HBO, whatever it was, about Kobe Bryant. Who's considered one of the best basketball players of all time. And he was talking about the period in his life where they had just won their first championship. And, I think whoever it was asked him, were you surprised? And he said, of course I wasn't surprised, because it's been here, and he points to his head. He's like, it's been up here the whole time. And something else that really resonated with me, if you read Arnold Schwarzenegger's book Total Recall, and whether you love him or hate him, the fact is he accomplished 3 huge goals that each one was highly unlikely. Coming from Austria, winning Mr. Olympia 7 times, being the highest paid actor, winning, becoming governor of the state of California as a foreigner, and all these things are very unlikely. But he said that something along the lines is whatever he wants to accomplish, before he even starts on it, he forms a picture of it, and the picture is so clear to him that he just gets this easy feeling, like he already has it, and like it's only a matter of time. And I think for me, it kind of goes back to something we just talked about, is being clear on what specifically you want, and making that picture clear and obsessing over that picture.
It's all about clarity. If you're not clear on where you want to go, then you can just kind of like wander the world, and it can get crazy, But if you have like you said, a clear vision, not necessarily I'm going to make X amount of dollars by X date, but you have that picture. You have a picture of what your house is going to look like, what your family is going to be doing, and then also associated with that is feeling that feeling, which is what they both talk about. It's like to see it is one thing, but if you're gonna, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was seeing it and he was feeling it. He was pumped up about it. And I love Arnold Schwarzenegger, by the way. His story is really incredible. And just to see it and feel it with clarity is so important. Something that I'm working on a lot. And it's not easy, but it's like any muscle. You keep practicing and practicing, and it'll get stronger.
Absolutely. And just a cool tip, I'm a big believer in setting up triggers or using triggers that already exist in your life to cue behaviors that you want to develop. So I think it's helpful to be like, okay, what's something I do a lot every day, whether it's washing your hands or whatever it is. Let's say washing your hands. And you say, okay, every time I wash my hands, I'm going to bring this picture to mind. And maybe you put a reminder on your bathroom mirror that reminds you of that. Hey, it says image. And every time you wash your hands, you do it. And pretty soon, you don't have to look at that card anymore. Just every time you wash your hands, you start bringing that picture to mind. And the more you do that, the more you start bringing the picture to mind in other parts of your life and other points of your day as well, until it becomes more of an obsession than just something you think about once every other day.
Wow, I love that. Everyone, please listen to what Brandon just said and do that. I'm going to literally start doing that today because that is a huge step that you can do literally every single day and start right now. There's nothing stopping you, and if you know where you want to go, you have an idea where you want to go, get clear, and just imagine that picture because that's where the magic will happen. That's where it all starts. So let's talk about, like you were talking about before, right after college, you went to start managing this restaurant. I know there's a lot of experiences and things that you can learn in the restaurant industry, but especially when you're running a restaurant, like you said, you came in one person, left totally different person.
Yeah.
So if you could talk about that a little bit and really hit on a few of the major things that you took away from that experience.
Yeah. Well, I realized the most important thing is knowing how to deal with people. Because you deal with all sorts of things. People calling you the day of the Super Bowl, like an hour before it starts, hey, I'm sick, I can't show up to work. You know, people quitting on the spot, drama between, different employees and all sorts of things. So I think learning to deal with people, one example was there was one guy who I loved him, I still love him, but he just wasn't good for the company anymore. He clearly didn't want to be there anymore. And I remember reading a book called Difficult Conversations. I used what the book said, and that same day, and he quit and thanked me for it. And, that was a learning experience. Okay, I don't have to go about it the way that I thought I do. Hey, you know what? You're fired.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, you learn, people are so nice and you're trusting of everyone. And then you realize that there are a lot of people that put one face on to you when you're there, and then behind your back, they'll steal, they'll say things, they'll have anything but your best interest at hand. And learning how to go the opposite way with that as well, and be very firm in those places, I think is very important as well. So, I mean, those were a few of the things, but also I think something else that was helpful was looking at, okay, there are all these. I mean, we did well, but there was still a lot of things, and I'm like, okay, these are things that I wanted to have happen, they didn't happen. I wanted to relaunch an entirely new concept, and so many things that I wanted to do that didn't happen, and looking at those different things, and the same thing like we talked about at the beginning, being like, okay, why didn't they happen? So then I can take those and make principles out of them, make rules of, okay, in the future I need to make sure I do this, and this differently.
So why didn't those things happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one thing is kind of goes back to the people thing is I was, 22, 23, right out of college, and I don't know if I had the belief in my vision to overcome the obstacles to that vision. Because at every point, I needed the cooperation of the chef. I needed the cooperation of employees. And I'd have, be like, okay, if we do this, this is going to blow things up for, whether it's an email marketing or events, but I needed people to do them and follow through. And, it wouldn't happen. And I'd be like, hey, what happened? And the chef, for example, it's too much work or this or that. And instead of being so certain of my vision, be like, you know what, maybe there's a point to that, or maybe there's a point to this. So I think that's one reason to it. I think another part goes back to the clarity is how clear was I in the first place of what exactly I wanted to create. And I think another part of it was, I guess two more parts. One is going back to that vision as well, is a lot of people say they want things, but the question is, do they want it with all their heart? And I don't know that I really wanted it with all my heart. It sounded nice, but I think deep down I knew that this isn't something I really wanted to be doing. So I think that's perhaps the biggest problem out of all those things. And I think the last thing was trying to do too much of it alone instead of going to people that had experience. I mean, I did have people that helped me a lot, the general manager of the Four Seasons and all these people giving me advice, but I don't know that I really showed my plan to enough people to tell me why I'm wrong and why I'm right, which would have given me the belief and given me a stronger game plan to move forward.
It sounds like also, correct if I'm wrong, but maybe you had a little bit of the confidence thing. Like you say, you were just coming out of college, and you have to deal with these, who knows, the chef was there for 10 years. It's like, because I've dealt with this also being young in the workplace and coming to other places and in like a managerial position and say, well, who's this kid? You know, like we've been here for 5 years. Like, who is he to tell me what to do? And it's a very weird situation to navigate. And like you said, it's very hard to come with that confidence. Like, even if you know this is what you need to do, two or three people are like, oh, you know, maybe not. It's too much work or this or that. It can really beat down your confidence. So I think it's very important. Even if people are shutting you down, saying it's not a good idea, don't let other people discredit your ideas. If you know that it's right, then it's most likely right. You have to listen to your intuition, not what someone that doesn't really love their job and doesn't really want to take it to that next level. You shouldn't get discouraged by them. So it's important for me, at least, to stay super confident always. It's so easy to get discouraged, guys. So just make sure you always, even if you boost yourself up, do some Tony Robbins, a couple, shift your physiological, we should. Do you like Tony Robbins, by the way?
Yeah, I love him. I mean, I there's some people that have followed everything he does. I haven't done that, but everything that I've seen, and I think he's great. I've quoted him in a lot of my courses as well. So yeah, I think he's great.
Yeah, not to diverge too much. We'll get back to it. Now, let's take this into what you're doing now, what you started, Insider School. How long ago did you start Insider School? And can you tell us a little bit about it and how it got started and also why you started it?
Sure. Well, Tal, just one point about the last thing we talked about, the confidence, because I think you're spot on with confidence, but I just want to get a little bit more specific with what exactly that means in this situation. Because it's one thing to be confident in general, but I think it's also important to realize that you could be confident in one area and not confident in another area. Mm-hmm. So I think specifically in this area, what confidence means, just having certainty in your vision and in your plan. And I don't think it's hard to do. I think it's just a question of realizing that that's what it takes. And I think you get it from two places. One, you just change how you talk to yourself in the pictures you see. And then I think another part is you show it to people that have that expertise and be like, hey, tell me why I'm wrong. Am I seeing this wrong? Look for dissenting points of view, and that will give you the confidence in your views when people say, you know what, you're right in these areas, that when people discredit you in those ways, you know that you have the backing of other people that have decades of experience and know for a fact that what you're talking about is true. And I think that gives you a lot of specialized confidence in those specific areas as well.
Yeah, that's huge. Thank you so much for clarifying that and getting into that a little more. That was spot on for sure. Cool. So before we jump into Insider School, what did you do after your the restaurant job? What was when did you start Insider School, by the way? I didn't see that.
2015.
2015, so a few years ago. Okay. So what were the years like leading up to Insider School? And then we'll talk about, why you started it, what it is, and we'll jump right into that.
Sure. What was interesting for me is I actually started Insider School while I was running the restaurant. And there was about a year overlap where I was doing both. So there was no period of finish the restaurant and then figure out what I want to do. There was a year overlap between the two.
Okay.
But I think what was interesting is I definitely did have that feeling inside of, even 2 years before, 3 years before, I'd ask myself the question, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, what would I be doing? And of course, your heart tells you things. Oh, I'd love to be doing something in education. I feel like it'd really help people and help myself. But then, you have these doubts that say, no, you know what, that's not really. So there's definitely this period of doubt, which I think is what you were trying to get at. For me, it wasn't in between the two things I was doing. For me, it was during when I was doing the restaurant. And inside, I'm like, you know what, this isn't really what I want to be doing or what I care to do. But there was this doubt of, okay, what should I be doing? And I'm like, I have no idea.
So how did you overcome that doubt? Like you're there at the restaurant, like this is not what I want to do. I'm not like passionate about this. I want to do something in education. But then your ego's like, who are you to do this or whatever it is? How do you overcome, like what are a few steps that you took to overcome that doubt to end up making that first step to start Insider School?
Sure. I think that's a great question. I think this is really, really useful because it was useful for me, these few things. Number one is to remember that doubt is the beginning of wisdom. I had a friend, he was 102, and he was in the hospital right before he died, and we're just kind of sitting there. I was trying to spend as much time with him as possible, and we're just sitting there, and out of nowhere, he's looking out in the distance. He puts his index finger up in the air, and he says, doubt is the beginning of wisdom. And two things are going on in my mind. One is I'm like, where did that come from? But because you would think something just coming out of nowhere from someone of that age, a lot of times it's like, okay, what are they talking about? But he was so sharp that I'm like, wow, I'm going to write that down. That's so, and I think it's very helpful to remember that ahead of time, knowing that at every point you're going to face doubt. It's not like you ever get rid of that doubt, and I think if you do, that's a big problem. A lot of people say, I've gotten clarity now, and I think if you have two long periods of time where you have absolute clarity, that's actually a much bigger problem than if you have clarity with points of doubt mixed into that clarity. So I think that was very helpful for me to remember when I was going through those periods, because if I wasn't questioning in the first place, I never would have found the answers.
Oh, okay. So that doubt kind of propelled you and put you on the track to find those answers. Is that what you're saying, basically?
Yeah, it's always that way. And, there's a great quote, too. I heard this much later, but it really relates to that. Einstein, he reportedly said this. He said that if he had 1 hour to solve a problem, he'd spend the first 55 minutes making sure he was asking the right question. And I think it ties to that a lot, is being okay of being lost in a question and making sure you're asking the right question in the first place, getting clarity on that, and being okay with not having the answer for a while.
He was a sharp guy, supposedly, from what they say.
From what they say.
Right. So I know you were talking about a little bit about, education was kind of on your heart. You felt like you could really make a difference and things like that. So why did you go ahead and start Insider School, and what were those first couple steps like?
Sure. Sorry to keep jumping back and forth. There was one more point about your last question that I think was really helpful for me. Is beforehand, I always thought, okay, whenever I make the jump to something else, it has to be a big, sweeping action. It's like, okay, I need to quit this and do something completely different and see if it works. But in reality, what it was for me is testing it out. Just like dipping one toe in the water, seeing what happens. Like, okay, that worked. Let me try something different and bigger. Okay, that worked. Let me try something else. So it wasn't like a huge sweeping change. It was just a bunch of little changes that led to the big change in the end. And it reminds me, too, I love this book. If anyone wants to read more about decision-making by Chip and Dan Heath, called Decisive. And one of the things they say in the book is they call it to ooch. And what that means is don't guess when you can know. In other words, anytime you can engineer a small test to find the answer, it's better to engineer the test than it is to go all in and find out that way. For example, you want to hire someone, it's much better to hire them for a test run and see how they do on a specific project instead of hiring them to the company. Or another example was, I think it was Cars.com. Bill Gross, who was the CEO, or the founder, he hired a CEO, and instead of saying, let me find out if this works or not, let's go all in, he said, you know what, your job is one thing. In the first 90 days, your job is just to sell one car. Because if you sell one car, it means we could sell more cars. And that's how it was for me too. It wasn't a big sweeping change. It was, okay, let me just launch one course and see what happens.
I like that because it ties back into what you were saying before about mitigating your risk, kind of, like protecting your, I can't remember the exact verbiage, but it kind of comes back to that same thing. You don't need to necessarily quit that job right now and see what happens. I mean, you can. Obviously, some people do well like that. But if you have that fear, then do like what you were saying on the side. Do one course. Go volunteer somewhere. See what really works. Before you want to make that leap, see if it works. Just to set yourself up for success in the future. So,
yeah, or ask people for advice, or tell them, even better, tell them to tell you why your thinking is wrong. That's so important. Or if you have a product you want to sell, try selling it. See what happens. Try to sell one. See why people won't buy. So there are a lot of things that someone can do.
Right. It's like bring it to the market, bring your product or service to the market, and just give it a little test run. See what people are saying about it. Tweak it, bring it back, do it again. And I feel it comes back to a lot of people want it right now. Everyone wants it now. But like you said, it's those little baby steps. You did this, and then this worked, and then you did one course, and then you did another course, and then you're like, oh, well, this is working, and then you went all in on it. It wasn't just like, okay, quit the restaurant, boom, I just started Insider School and rocked out with Udemy. So it's really a progression. I think people really need to understand that and remember that, me as well, that patience, there's nothing that can best patience. So you got started. Oh, I think we skipped that question, but thank you for going back, because I love the insights that we're really getting deep on these, and that's what I really am trying to do. So now you had this idea. Okay, I want to bring knowledge to the workplace. I want a better knowledge. Where did that come from? Like, where did that idea come from even?
Yeah, I actually remember the specific day where the idea came from. It was freshman year of college, and I started taking these classes, and I was so excited. Supposedly it's top 10 business school. I'm going to learn so many things. And I was sitting in class and wondering, okay, this class, for example, I have to memorize something like 300 pages of PowerPoint slides so I could write it on a piece of paper so I could take a test. And I was just sitting there wondering, when would I ever use this? And at the same time, I was really turned off by the fact the professor was trying to scare everybody. So you know what? Half of you are going to fail on this final or on the midterm. It's just the way it is. Like, be okay with that. Be prepared for it. I'm just sitting there like, why does any of this matter? First of all, memorizing this stuff won't help any of us actually running or even working in a business for many reasons. The knowledge was so theoretical, but even more so, learning something when you're 19 and expecting to be able to use it when you're 22, 23, 24, 25 is just not how something works in reality. And Anders Ericsson, who he's considered kind of the go-to expert on expertise, he's the one that created the quote-unquote 10,000-hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell popularized in his book Outliers. And he's a big, he talks a lot about this in his writing and his books. He's like, the idea that you can teach someone something and expect for them to be able to use it perfectly in the future is completely not true. So I was sitting there in college wondering these things, and I remember I read a book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and it was the opposite of what I was learning in my marketing class. So again, I just wanted to know why I was wrong. I wasn't trying to change things or anything like that, but I just wanted to know, okay, I'm frustrated. Why am I wrong? So I went to the dean of the university, and I said, look, I'm having these frustrations. I feel like this is an outdated education, and I'm learning more from books that cost a few dollars in these classes that cost a lot more than that. And she said, well, I know. That's why we're coming out with a new curriculum. And I said, yeah, I've seen the new curriculum, and it's basically the same curriculum with different names for the same courses. And after 20 or 30 minutes, she started sharing with me why she was frustrated with her kids who are in high school and middle school, and said to me, you know what, it's the system. It's not, you can't blame us. And I remember walking out of her office that day, and I was so frustrated. And that's when I really felt like if I could discover for myself what are the things that I wish I'd learned in school but didn't. What are the things that would have helped me? What are the things that would have helped move my life forward? I would love to discover those things. And if one day I can make an impact for other people to do the same, I would love to do that. And I remember specifically walking out of her office, walking down the sidewalk on campus, turning the corner, and having that thought. So that's really where the thought came from, but that's not where the action came from. The action came 3 years after that, or actually more than that, several years after that.
I mean, that's incredible. Where'd you go to college?
I went to USC.
USC, that's what I thought. Wasn't 100% sure. Is
And
that where
I
you
just
went?
want to clarify, by the way, I say that, and a lot of people think I'm anti-school. Or I did a course on Beat College. I have a family friend. He took that course, and he started spending 10 minutes on homework a night. And he was doing so well in high school. And he's like, you know what, I'm going to do the exact same thing in college. And I said, look, that was my experience in college, but I'm not offering it as a blanket statement about college for everybody. That was just my experience. So I told him, like, you know what, you go for yourself with no preconceptions and discover for yourself what is best for you and what makes sense. So I just wanted to clarify that I'm not necessarily saying that college is bad or even USC is bad. I loved USC, but that I just had I personally had some serious frustrations when I was in school.
And you are definitely not the only one, Brandon. That's a big concern these days. Is the dean said, it's not them per se; they're part of the problem, but it's the whole system in general. Just the fact that this drives me crazy. You go to school, you go to this nice college. I don't know about you, but I went to Ohio State. They didn't teach me how to file taxes, how to do a tax return, any of that, and those are like very important things that it's like the one thing, no matter what you do, you're going to have to do taxes, and so that's where the seed was planted for you. And it sounds like it was kind of incubating and just brewing. What was that major, shift there? Like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put up a course on Udemy. Or what was that first step like?
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of – I'd been wanting to do it for many years. And when I was in college, I actually wrote – it was an ebook at the time, How to Get Good Grades in Less Time. I was really curious. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to finish college, what can I do to still get everything I want out of it, but minimize my time in it? How can I still get straight A's, learn whatever it is I'm supposed to learn, but also not have to spend my time on things I don't want to spend on, and instead spend that time learning things that I actually want to learn about? So I had this ebook, and I've been wanting to do something with it for a long time. And one of the best things for me that came out of college is I had a friend, and we started a mastermind call every Thursday. We get on the phone and we talk. We brainstorm. Hey, these are the opportunities. These are the challenges. What do you think? Why am I wrong? What other things should I be exploring? And this is about 2 years into our calls, and he's like, Brandon, you've had this book. Why don't you just turn it into a course and put it online? And in that moment, I was just inspired, and I told him, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. By our call next Thursday, I'm going to take that book. I'm going to record it. I'm going to make the videos for it. I'm going to turn it into a course. I'm going to put it online. I'm going to put it out there, and we'll see what happens. But I'm telling you right now that by next Thursday, I'm going to have my course live online. So within a 1 week period, I spent 2 weeks. I used the Apple earbuds. I didn't wait to get any special equipment. I didn't wait for a video guy, nothing. I just recorded the course. I lost my voice for 2 weeks after that. I got sick. I barely ate that week, but the course was done. And that's how I started. And I didn't have any plans to do anything after that. until, the next course that, again, was just kind of on a whim, and that one I did it in 2 days instead of a week. And then from that course, that's when people started asking, okay, what are your favorite books? Or how can I read even more books? Or can you share with me what you're learning from all these books, because I don't have time to learn it? Or look, these are the things I didn't learn in school. Can you create courses about that? And that's really where the idea came from, which was something that I originally didn't even intend on doing.
That's really great how you put that. I mean, first of all, I think it's incredible how you had that accountability. You're like, by our call next week, this is going to be done. And that's clarity. You put a time frame on it. You know what you're going to do. You don't necessarily know how you're going to do it, but you know the process of what needs to be done. And you made it happen. So,
and I think to that point too, this is worth remembering because it's been very helpful for me. Because how many times have we all had this experience where we're like, okay, you know what? By this date, I'm going to finish this thing. But then we push it off, or we work a little bit and it doesn't get done by that date. And we're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to push it back another week. And it ends up taking 3 weeks longer than you wanted it to take. But whatever, it's done. And that's kind of when I realized that promises lead to action. By making those external promises to people, you get things done. And I realized that it's actually important to be proactive about making those promises. In this case, it kind of just happened, and I did it on a whim. But it's very helpful to then proactively go out to people and be like, you know what? I'm putting, a stake in the ground. And I'm letting you know that by this date, this will be done. This is specifically what I mean by done, and hold me to it.
It's the accountability. You know what I mean? If for some reason, for humans, it's so easy not easy for us, but it's, I guess, quote unquote, easier for us to lie to ourselves than to somebody else. Most people, at least, which is weird. You would think that it'd be the opposite, because you don't want to let yourself down, but that's like what we're doing when we make these promises to, like, oh, I'll do this by next week, but you don't tell anyone. It's kind of like by yourself. The only person that's going to know is you. You're going to be like, oh, I should have done this last week, but I'm going to push it back. And there's no one to say, hey, Brandon, are you almost done with that? Like, what's going on? Or even
Sure.
if they don't say anything, you don't want to let them down because they
Sure.
heard you say it. So I think accountability is huge. I just hired a coach, mentor recently, and that's been huge for me. It's that accountability factor. He goes, by this day, we need to have X, Y, Z done. Normally, I probably wouldn't have gotten it done, but it's the accountability. I don't want to say, no, I didn't get this done or whatever, make up some lame excuse, because there's no excuse why you shouldn't pursue your goals. If you're healthy and you're okay, you're good to go, then there's really no excuse that we can make that's viable.
Sure. Yeah, promises lead to action. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and being proactive about making promises.
Love that. Promises lead to action. So you created these first couple courses, and I like how you started getting feedback from people, and you made that pivot. You're like, okay, I didn't necessarily, this wasn't my vision in the beginning, but these people are asking for these things, and it sounds like you saw an opportunity. What did you do there? Is that when Insider School came to be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess on one side it always was there because it's what I believed in, but yeah, when it really came to be is when other people started asking for more. And that's when I started making more courses. That's when I said, okay, you know what, every Tuesday I'm going to send an email. I'm going to curate thousands of pages of expert material for you in a 2-minute email. Or I'll take tens of thousands of pages and condense it into a 1-hour course. So that all came from other people asking for those things specifically.
And you started up on Udemy, right? Just creating courses and putting them up on there. I know you have a couple very successful courses on there.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I'm on a lot of different places, but that first course specifically was there.
Okay, cool. Now, let's jump into the actual birth of your company. So you had this idea, seed was planted a long time ago, you put out a few courses, and now you're at the point where you're creating more courses, getting feedback. When did your company actually start? What were those very first initial steps to kind of put a stamp on it, open up your website, and just make it happen?
Yeah, well, I think it started on I think it started the second I got off the phone call with my friend. because in my mind, something starts the minute you take action and you start on the path and you're committed to staying on that path. So for me, it started right then. Other than that, I can't even. There's no single point that I'd be like, okay, this is the day that it officially started, because for me, it started on that day and just continued to grow and evolve on that day.
And
And
even it's like what?
Oh, go on.
No, what were you gonna say? Sorry for cutting you off.
I was gonna say too. I remember hearing this in college, and it really stuck with me. The idea of recognizing the difference between creation and discovery. And what that means is, I once heard that 93% of successful businesses end up succeeding in something other than what they originally started out doing. And a classic example of that is Sony, that started out making rice cookers, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the experience that almost everybody has. So for me, it started on the day that I created something, but it was important being open to, okay, what am I going to discover along the way that's going to be the real success?
Yeah, it's always super important just to be open-minded and be able to make that pivot. A lot of companies that die are the ones that don't pivot. Blockbuster, the Kmart, whatever, they're going out of business because they didn't pivot when these new companies were coming up. When Netflix started, I was reading something, and someone had the option to buy Netflix. I think this is Blockbuster or something. They denied it. Oh, that'll never work. And now look who's out of business and who's worth $60 billion. It's being able to make that shift and staying open to make that pivot, I think, is so important for business owners. Even if you don't fully change your business, go from one to the next, just being open-minded is incredibly important. So for those people watching or listening that do not know what Insider School is, tell us about Insider School, what it is that you specialize in, and just tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah. What we do is we condense thousands of pages of expert material into short, actionable steps. So whether that's an email, a 2-minute email that's curated from thousands of pages, or whether it's a course on mastering your mindset or your productivity or your health or your persuasion, that's, again, taken from all the best books from that topic and condensed into a short course. That's what we do. So we want your learning to lead to action, and we don't want your learning just to lead to knowledge, which is why it's all about going through a lot of information and just giving it to you in a short, actionable way so that you can take it and use it to move your life forward, to upgrade your life.
Right, absolutely. It makes total sense. Now, looking back, you're already a few years in Insider School and building the course, so you have some experience now. I'm wondering, what are a few of the most important ingredients that have led to your success so far, building up this large following and have all these people signed up? If you could dial into 2 or 3 certain factors that are major attributors to that, I would love to hear about all that.
I think the first thing is, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's a big hero of mine, he said that he who writes to himself writes to an eternal public. And I think for me, from day one, I was never trying to create anything. I mean, obviously I had a belief about what's wrong and what could be done to fix it, but I was never trying to get to an end destination. I was just at every step, first and foremost, writing to myself. Because I knew that when it resonates with me, that's when other people would benefit from it as well. And more importantly, I knew that if even nobody else benefited from it, I could still read that email or watch that course and be like, these are exactly the ingredients that I know will get me the results that I want.
Love that. So what are a couple other things, that maybe from the business side or kind of just execution-wise?
Yeah. I think another thing is just getting things done. And what's always been very helpful for me is having those deadlines. Whether it's that first course or whether it's calling up the production team and saying, hey, you know what, January 21st, we're shooting a new course. When it's 3 weeks before and I'm like, it feels like I have 3 months of work left. It's those tight things, it's those very short bursts, those short sprints where most of all the progress came from. And I think engineering those has been very helpful at every step along the way.
And it's like people say, this is how it is, the diamonds are built from the pressure. And a lot of the diamonds that you've created that have led to where you are now are from those pressure moments. It's the same with me. I have a kind of a random question for you. When you were younger, anytime during your life, did you have procrastination hurdles you had to get over? Were you that kind of person where you'd kind of wait till the last day and then do a paper, or was it not really like that for you?
I would always wait till the last day, but I never saw it as a problem. I just saw it. Some people I would thrive on that, and I'd be very proud that I would deliberately do that.
That's incredible. I mean, I was the same way too, and then the end product would always be great. Usually, when my mind was in the right place, at least. But I think
Sure.
that's good for people to hear, not to necessarily be so hard on yourself if you are that kind of person, but just to keep in context.
And I don't think anybody is that kind of person, or anybody is the other kind of person. I don't think there's such thing as anybody being any kind of person, because in the end, we're all it's just all a behavior, and any behavior can be changed because it's just a learned pattern. It's a learned strategy, and those strategies, just because we didn't have any say in putting them in place, doesn't mean that we can't easily change them.
Right, that makes sense. It keeps coming back to the same things. You need to be able to stay open and make those shifts, whether that's in your business, in your mindset, in your life, in your health, whatever it is. You just got to stay open and be willing and able to make that shift.
Sure, absolutely.
Now, wrapping up, I just thought of an incredible question to ask you. I don't know how it didn't come to me before. Not to put you on the spot or anything. What are your top 3 books that you have read out of the thousands? What are the top 3?
As soon as you said not to put you on the spot, I knew that's what you're going to ask. And the truth is, I do have a list, and if anybody can email me, I'll email them back with a list of, it's like 25 or 40 or whatever it is of my favorite books in different categories. But the way that I always look at books is books are tools to move life forward. And for me, the favorite book depends on what specific area I have a question in that I want answered. Like a book that had a huge impact on me in 2007 was, I'm driving to high school and I'm listening to The Power of Now. And at that point in my life, that was one of my top 3 books. And it still is in that category. But I don't know that if I were to read it today, it would have the same impact. Or when I read the autobiography of Andrew Carnegie, that had such a big impact on me. And that's what I recommend everybody not necessarily read that book, but I think it's so helpful reading about the people that have qualities or have had results that you would like to emulate, or you would like to have some percentage of. Whether it's Andrew Carnegie, who is worth $310 billion, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's a dancer or a singer or whatever it is, Arnold Schwarzenegger, especially for people that want to go into acting, so all those books, all those biographies I've really, really loved. And a lot of Napoleon Hill's books I've loved as well. One of my favorites actually is, I've never heard anybody talk about this for some reason, but it's called How to Raise Your Own Salary. Definitely had a big impact on me. But yeah, those are a few that come to mind.
Love it. So I guess I'll make this a little more dialed in. When it comes to thinking idea to reality, the name of the podcast, that's what I'm trying to do, is help people who have this idea bring it into reality. If there are a book or two that you could name that would possibly help push them forward. I know a lot of people are going to be signing up for your courses and your newsletters and your website and everything to kind of get it condensed. But there's still a lot of people that like to, get the whole thing, the whole meat. So a couple books that come to mind as far as idea to reality.
One that comes to mind is Ready, Fire, Aim. I think that's definitely one. I mean, it has something for everybody, every stage of business, but I think it's very helpful for everybody to think along those lines. So it's definitely one that comes to mind. Starting to think about books on mindset as well. I'm trying to think what specifically, because I mean, ultimately, we never outperform our self-image. So whether it's Psycho-Cybernetics, or a book on neurolinguistic programming. I mean, there's so many on those. I think those are very helpful, getting idea to reality as well, working on the internal stuff. But yeah, again, those are just a few things that come to mind.
Love it. I'm definitely going to check those last two out that you said, because and it's interesting because you said idea to reality. You don't think that the idea, I mean, when you break it down, it's like obvious. I'm like, of course, the idea comes from the mind. You know what I mean? So literally that's where you should be starting. If once you can change this, it'll change everything else. So jumping into the mindset, you literally led me right into my final question. How is your mindset now, being 28, having read all these books, gone through, created all these courses, have this incredible business, compared to how you were earlier on in life? What are some major mindset shifts or changes that you can look back and see like, wow, I'm totally different now than I was then?
Sure. I think the first thing is I just want to re-emphasize that. I think it's so important. We never outperform our self-image. We never outperform how we see ourselves, which is why the mindset piece is so important in the first place. But I think different ways that I'm different is that I've grown is, number one, learning to be more direct and more certain in my vision where I'm going, and standing for that. You know, like I said, that's something that I wasn't doing very well before, and that's definitely one change. Another change is getting over that need of always being liked. I think that's so important because you can't go your whole life if you want to do anything and expect to be liked. I remember at the beginning when people would send, occasionally you get, even before at the restaurant, you get an email for somebody, and even if you're thinking like this makes no sense, and you just get the sense that some people want to complain whenever they can, it would still hurt me so much. And now I could be a lot more detached from it emotionally and look at it very logically and say, okay, where is this true? Where can I improve? And if there's nothing in it, I won't even think about it a minute later. So I think that's another very, very important piece. And then obviously another huge part was just been all the learning I've done the last 5 years, reading over 1,000 books and every day reading more and learning from people. That's been another huge change. I think another big one has been, despite learning on my own and having that ability and having that skill set, realizing that there really is no substitute from learning from other people. And I think it really takes both. So going to other people and asking them to teach you things or asking questions, going to live in-person events and things and certifications and in-depth workshops and classes and all those things, I realize is very important as well. So I think in all those ways, it's been a big shift than it was maybe at the beginning.
Love it, Brandon. It's all this knowledge is here, quote unquote, for the taking. It's here for us to utilize, to implement where we can, and we can't let it go to waste. It's literally gold on paper. That's how I see it. Once I made that shift, I was like, wow, I could read this book of this guy that was worth $400 billion and condense it into a 300-page book. It's not obviously everything, but it's incredible when you think of it like that. And a lot of people don't like, oh, I don't like reading or whatever it is, which is okay. You have audio books and all these different things, sources like you have that really condense these and make them digestible for people. So I just want to acknowledge you for everything you've done and what you're continuing to do and your mission. I think it's so important, and you're really making a difference, Brandon. I appreciate you. And where can people find you? Where can we reach you via email? If you want to give that out, I don't want to blow up your email for no reason, or maybe on social media or things like that.
Yeah, well, it's a little too late to not blow up my email. That's already happening just because I give it out and get questions from students all the time. But my email is brandon@insiderschool.com. But most importantly, I'd encourage everybody to go to insiderschool.com, sign up for the free email list. Something I'm actually most proud of is every week I send just a pure content, actionable email taken from usually several books, and it's like, hey, here's something that you can do to instantly be more charismatic. Here's something you can do to, 5 things you can do today to be a better salesperson. Here's something you can do, or 5 things, or 3 things, whatever, to be a better public speaker. And it's always taken from different things, really always in a 2-minute form. So I'd encourage everybody, go to insiderschool.com, put in your email, and just let me know what you think along the way.
Sounds like you are Mr. Action, Brandon, making the action happen. So thank you for making the action happen on the podcast. You know, I had a great time talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.